November 24th, 1939, 3:30 a.m. Shoeburyness, Thames Estuary, England. A Royal Navy officer steps into black mud and freezing water, carrying tools that have been stripped of as much metal as possible. Behind him lies the shipping system that feeds London. In front of him sits a German weapon so secret that Britain still does not fully understand how it kills. Everyone thought they understood naval mines. The old kind floated below the surface. A ship hit one, it exploded. Minesweepers cut the mooring cable, the mine rose, and it was destroyed. Dangerous, yes. Mysterious, no. But what they didn't know was that Germany had already moved beyond that entire system. This new mine did not need contact. It did not need a ship to strike it. It could rest silently on the seabed and wait for a steel hull to pass overhead. No visible tripwire, no cable to cut, no warning at all. And the consequences were already unfolding. Only 3 days earlier, on November 21st, 1939, the British cruiser HMS Belfast had been torn apart by one of these new weapons. In the Thames approaches, the danger had become so severe that at one point only one of the 3 deep-water channels into the river remained open. During November alone, mines sank 27 merchant ships, totaling 120,958 tons, along with the destroyer HMS Blanche. So the engineering problem was now brutally simple to describe and almost impossible to solve. Britain had to protect thousands of steel ships from an invisible seabed weapon triggered by the ship's own physical properties, while keeping one of the most important ports in the world alive. And it had to do it in weeks, not months. This is the story of how Germany's first great naval secret weapon nearly choked Britain's sea lifeline in 1939, and how Britain broke the crisis through bomb disposal, physics, degaussing, magnetic sweeping, and one of the fastest emergency engineering responses of the war. What you're about to discover is not just how the mine worked, but how Britain learned to fight an invisible weapon by turning ships, cables, and even aircraft into tools of magnetic warfare. To understand why this moment mattered, you need to understand what Britain really was in 1939. Britain was not just an island. It was a machine built on shipping. Food came by sea. Fuel came by sea. Steel, grain, oil, troops, ammunition, machinery, everything depended on ports, estuaries, convoy routes, and harbor approaches functioning every day without interruption. If those routes were damaged, Britain suffered. If they were blocked, Britain starved. Germany knew that. In the First World War, naval mines had already proven that they could disrupt trade far more cheaply than major fleet battles. During the 1930s, German engineers pushed the concept much further. Working with companies like Rheinmetall-Borsig, they refined a mine that did not wait to be touched. It reacted to a ship's magnetic presence. Think of the old mine as a glass bottle on the floor that only breaks when someone steps directly on it. The magnetic mine was more like a hidden sensor under the floorboards. You did not need to touch it. You only needed to pass close enough for the device to notice you. That mattered because British countermeasures were built around the old logic. A moored contact mine could be found indirectly. Its cable could be cut. Its position could be guessed. Traditional mine-sweeping methods were mechanical because the mine itself was mechanical. But a magnetic ground mine sitting on the seabed, with no visible horn and no mooring cable, was a different category of problem entirely. The first weeks of the campaign were filled with confusion. Ships were being damaged from below. Harbors and approaches became dangerous with little warning. Minesweepers swept water and found nothing obvious. The usual rules did not explain the losses. Meanwhile, Germany had achieved what every secret weapons program wants in its opening phase: surprise. This was not simply a mine attack. It was an attack on British assumptions. A steel ship, once seen as strength, had suddenly become a liability. The stronger and larger the hull, the more powerful its magnetic signature. That meant every steel merchantman, every destroyer, every cruiser entering shallow water might be carrying its own trigger mechanism with it. And that is why this crisis belongs in engineering history. It was not decided first by admirals or by battleships or by who had more guns. It was decided by who understood the invisible science faster. But here's the engineering challenge nobody had solved before. If the ship itself was what the mine detected, then how do you make a steel fleet invisible without stopping that fleet from sailing? The British challenge had three separate layers. First, locating the threat. Many of the mines were aircraft-laid. A German seaplane could fly low at night, drop the weapon by parachute into an estuary or harbor approach, and leave almost no clear trace. Witnesses might see a splash. They might see what looked like a sailor's kit bag descending. Then the object would disappear into mud, tide, and shallow water. That meant a route could be deadly long before anyone knew exactly where the danger sat. Second, understanding the trigger. This was the most important layer. A steel ship behaves like a giant weak magnet. Part of that comes from the steel itself. Part of it comes from being built inside Earth's magnetic field. As the hull is assembled, the ship acquires a magnetic character. When it moves through water, it disturbs the surrounding field. Imagine moving a large iron tool near a compass. The compass needle shifts even though nothing touches it. A magnetic mine exploited the same basic idea, but on the scale of a warship. Once Britain examined the recovered mine, it discovered something crucial. The German device reacted to a change in magnetism, especially in the vertical magnetic field. In simple terms, the mine was listening for the magnetic distortion caused by a large steel ship passing over it. That meant no physical contact was required. A ship could seem safe. The water around it could look calm, yet below, the mine was already reading the ship's invisible presence. Third, designing a workable countermeasure. Even if Britain understood the trigger, theory alone solved nothing. It still needed answers for crowded ports, merchant traffic, warships, and shallow water routes under wartime pressure. There were only two basic solutions. One, destroy the mine before the ship arrived. Two, reduce the ship's magnetic signature so the mine would not react. Both sounded straightforward. Neither was. To destroy the mine, Britain needed a way to produce a magnetic effect strong enough to trigger it intentionally, but from a safe distance. To protect the ship, Britain needed to counteract the magnetic field of an entire steel hull using cables, currents, and measurements that could actually be applied in dockyards and ports, and it had to be done immediately. This seemed impossible because the mine was not attacking a single target. It was attacking the entire system of maritime movement. Every channel, every harbor approach, every steel ship became part of the problem. This seemed completely impossible. Here is why no one had solved it before. The weapon did not attack what a ship did. It attacked what a ship was. The turning point came from one of the most dangerous recovery operations of the war. On the night of November 23, 1939, mine watchers at Shoeburyness saw aircraft-laid mines come down intact on the mudflats offshore. That was the breakthrough Britain desperately needed. For the first time, the enemy's secret weapon was not just destroying ships, it was sitting still, waiting to be reached. The Admiralty sent specialists from HMS Vernon, the Royal Navy's mine and torpedo school at Portsmouth. The team was led by Lieutenant Commander John Ouvry. What followed is the central sequence of the story. The day walkthrough. 1 a.m. Ouvry is awakened and ordered to move at once. Britain may finally have a complete sample of the mine that has been closing routes and crippling ships. 3:30 a.m. He arrives at Shoeburyness. It is dark, cold, muddy, and uncertain. He is not confronting a known British device. He is confronting a German weapon with an unknown firing logic. Before dawn, the team removes as much metal as possible and uses non-magnetic brass tools where they can. That detail matters. It shows they already suspect the mine is sensitive to magnetic disturbance. It was like trying to disarm a burglar alarm while wearing the exact sensor that might set it off. Morning, Ouvry and his men begin the painstaking work. They agree on a visual sequence of actions so that if he is killed, the observing team farther back can learn from the failed step and continue with the next mine. That is not just courage, that is battlefield engineering discipline. Hour after hour, the mine remains intact. Every movement has to be reasoned through. The team has no safe training version, no manual, no second chance. Roughly 12 hours later, Ouvry succeeds. The mine is rendered safe. That one success changed everything. The fuse was sent for analysis to the physicist Albert B. Wood, working with W. F. B. Shaw and H. W. Kelly. At the same time, Admiralty scientists, including Charles Goodeve and E. C. Bullard, began turning the recovered data into countermeasures. Now the British solution unfolded in 4 connected steps. Step 1. Decode the mine's sensing logic. The key finding was that the mine reacted to the ship's magnetic effect in the vertical field. This was the insight Britain had lacked. Once the sensing principle was understood, the weapon stopped being magical. It became an engineering system with inputs and thresholds. And if a machine has inputs, engineers can design around those inputs.
Step 2. Reduce the ship's magnetic signature. This became known as degaussing. If the mine was a guard dog that reacted to a scent, degaussing was the attempt to weaken the scent before the ship entered the yard. Electrical cables were fitted around the hull in carefully chosen positions. A controlled electric current ran through them, creating a magnetic field that opposed the ship's own field. The result was not total invisibility, but a major reduction in the ship's magnetic signature. For ships that could not immediately receive permanent systems, another method called wiping was used. A current-carrying cable was moved along the hull to change the ship's magnetic condition temporarily. This was elegant because it attacked the mine's trigger directly. The ship was still a steel hull, but now it looked different to the mine. Step 3. Trigger mines deliberately with magnetic sweeps. That solved only half the problem because an untriggered mine on the seabed was still waiting for the next ship. So British engineers developed the LL sweep, also called the double L sweep. 2 vessels towed long cables and pulsed heavy electrical current through them. This created an artificial magnetic field strong enough to set off nearby mines at a safer distance. In other words, Britain stopped letting ships accidentally trigger the weapon and started firing it on purpose. This was the real breakthrough in mine warfare thinking. The mine expected a target. The Royal Navy learned how to simulate one. Step 4. Take the magnetic trigger into the air. Then came the most remarkable solution of all. If a magnetic field could be generated by ships towing cables, perhaps it could also be generated by an aircraft flying low over the sea. That idea produced the strange but brilliant Vickers-Wellington DWI minesweeper aircraft. A huge circular ring, about 51 feet in diameter, was fitted to a Wellington bomber. A separate engine powered the current needed to generate a magnetic field capable of detonating mines from above. The first successful detonation came on January 8, 1940. Think about that timeline. From the recovery of the mine on the mudflats in late November to an operational airborne magnetic minesweeper in early January. That is not routine development. That is emergency wartime innovation at full speed. But what they didn't know was that Britain's answer would not be one single invention, it would be a whole new system. Bomb disposal, scientific analysis, ship degaussing, magnetic sweeping, and airborne detonation, all built almost at once.
Once the science was understood, Britain faced the next challenge: scale. A degaussing system was not a laboratory trick. It had to be installed on real ships, in real ports, under wartime conditions. That meant cable, current, dock labor, measurement, maintenance, and constant adjustment. Warships and merchant ships all needed treatment. Procedures had to be created, staff had to be trained, equipment had to be manufactured fast. The Admiralty created a special organization to handle it. Ships were fitted with degaussing coils, others were wiped for temporary protection. Mine-sweeping methods were updated. The LL sweep entered service. The Wellington DWI added an entirely new airborne method of clearance. And the results came quickly enough to matter. The first goal was not perfection, it was survival. Keep traffic moving, reopen dangerous routes, restore confidence, prevent the Port of London and other key approaches from sliding into operational paralysis. By January 20th, 1940, Winston Churchill could publicly say that the magnetic mine problem was not one Britain regarded as insoluble. That mattered because just weeks earlier the weapon had looked like a strategic shock. Germany had achieved surprise, but Britain had broken the mystery. The mine threat did not disappear overnight. Mines remained deadly throughout the war. New variants followed, including acoustic and other influence types. But the opening crisis, the period when Britain did not understand the weapon and seemed always one step behind it, had been broken. That is the real meaning of the 8-week victory. Not total elimination, control. The real breakthrough came when Britain stopped treating the mine as an unexplained disaster and started treating it as a machine with a logic that could be measured, copied, and defeated.
This crisis changed naval warfare permanently. Before 1939, many officers still thought of mines mainly as physical obstacles. After 1939, that view was outdated. Now the mine could sense. It could react to magnetic influence. Soon it would react to sound and pressure as well. That forced navies to rethink the ship itself. A ship was no longer just armor, engines, range, and guns. It was also a signature. If the enemy could detect your magnetic field, your sound, your wake, or your pressure effect, then invisibility became an engineering problem as important as armor. That idea reaches directly into the modern world. Today, warships are designed around radar signature, acoustic signature, infrared signature, and magnetic signature. The principle behind all of that can be seen in this 1939 crisis. The magnetic mine taught navies that survivability begins long before the first explosion. It begins in what the ship quietly emits into the environment. There was also a national lesson. Germany proved that a relatively inexpensive secret weapon could threaten the maritime life of an island power more effectively than many direct naval clashes. Britain proved that rapid scientific adaptation could neutralize surprise before surprise became catastrophe. That pattern repeated again and again in the war. Radar versus bombers, ASDIC and sonar versus submarines, radar warning receivers versus night fighters, electronic deception versus guided attack. The magnetic mine crisis was one of the earliest examples of that larger struggle. Now consider the counterfactual. If Ouvry's team had failed at shoeburyiness, if the fuse had been destroyed, if the Admiralty had needed months instead of weeks, if London's approaches had narrowed further in the winter of 1939, Britain's shipping losses could have escalated sharply before the larger land war in Western Europe had even begun. That is why this story matters. It was not a side episode. It was a hidden engineering battle over whether Britain's war system would keep functioning. And here is where the story becomes truly remarkable. One mine on one mudflat gave Britain the technical insight it needed to keep an entire maritime nation moving.
So here is the achievement in one sentence. In about 8 weeks, Britain turned Germany's magnetic mine from a mysterious port-threatening secret weapon into a manageable engineering problem. The next time you watch footage of wartime convoys, destroyers, or harbor defenses, remember what was really happening beneath the surface. Those ships were not just dodging submarines and aircraft, they were moving through an invisible battlefield shaped by magnetism, measurement, and countermeasure design. That is the living legacy of this story. Modern navies still protect ships by managing what those ships emit into the world. The mine crisis of 1939 was one of the moments that taught them why that matters. The final lesson is simple. The most dangerous weapon is often the one that changes the rules before anyone realizes the rules have changed. And the haunting question is this. If Ouvry had made one wrong move on that mudflat that morning, how long would Britain have remained blind to the weapon that was closing its sea roads? This channel explores the engineering secrets that changed history. If you want more stories like this, where hidden design decisions, classified ideas, and emergency innovation altered the course of war, subscribe and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching.